In 2014, access to justice is harder to achieve than ever before, with many more barriers that prevent the most vulnerable in society to effectively challenge unjust systems that impact directly on their lives. And this is at a time when there's many large policy changes happening both nationally and locally, NHS reform, welfare reform, balancing local authority budgets. And then there's also legal aid reform. Now, I've been this morning kind of been shunted a bit because they've announced that they're going to hold back on some of their decisions of cutting criminal legal aid. But I'm going to talk about civil legal aid. On the 1st of April, we're going to see the anniversary of one of the biggest changes to legal aid since its inception in 1950, where the government proposed 350 million had to be found out of the legal aid bill. And this included 89 million for cases classed under what's known as social welfare law. And that's help for people who are on low income, receiving legal advice and help for debt, welfare benefit issues, employment, housing and community care. And on the 31st of March 2013, a client on low income could have received legal help with challenging a poorly made work assessment by Atos, or with help with spiralling debts following a change in circumstances, for example, or managing rent or mortgage arrears before they were getting out of hand. The following day, on the 1st of April, they couldn't, for debt and for welfare benefit issues. Community care and housing still exist, but even for housing, there's very little that remains that you can do under legal aid. Out of scope, or not being able to be included, are housing benefit queries, discretionary housing payment issues. So there's discretionary housing payment is a top-up of your housing benefit where you've been affected by under-occupancy or bedroom tax. Deposit disputes, advice on rent arrears before threat of possession, and things like tenancy status, boundary disputes, neighbour issues and allocation of housing is all out. Alongside the £89 million of savings from legal aid on social welfare law, the Low Commission anticipate a further loss of £40 million per annum by 2015 in reductions by the local authorities funding advice and legal support, which will only continue to impact access to justice. The high cost of the legal aid bill compared to other countries has often been used as to justify some of the cutbacks here. But when you take into comparison the high costs of judicial systems in other countries where their legal aid is low, and offset that against the comparatively lower court budgets and public prosecution costs here in the UK, it kind of levels off. Whilst we maintain money advice at reduced capacity, for Citizens Advice Shropshire, this has meant a loss of over £200,000 in legal aid funding a year, the loss of specialist qualified caseworkers and their support staff. But more importantly, it's the loss of over 1,400 acts of assistance that we could have given to clients in Shropshire who needed help with debt and welfare benefit issues. And the total impact for Shropshire is bigger than that because there were other providers, for example A4U, who also had contracts in legal aid under social welfare law. Now, some of the justification, again, for reforms is that litigation costs a lot and we're too keen to seek redress in court. But under the new regulations for legal aid, it meant that you couldn't have a legal aid contract without employing a litigator. And this has meant that many not-for-profit organisations like ourselves, renowned for delivering low-cost, high-quality services, have been unable to bid for future contracts. This also includes the Housing Possession Duty Court desk that Citizens Advice Shropshire has run for several years before it being given out in a legal aid contract. It used to be funded previously by the community, the government. Legal aid funding is now targeted at crisis and not prevention. Waiting for a situation to get to crisis not only has an increased cost to the public purse, but also creates revolving door syndrome where people don't get the help for the whole problem. Most often problems come in clusters Last year we dealt with over 9,000 inquiries but had 27,000 issues attached. So on average, a client with an inquiry will have 3 issues presenting. For example, a client in work with a family becomes diagnosed with cancer and will require time off for treatment and recovery. There are employment issues around sick pay and time off, benefit issues around DLA, possible drop in income that meant you can't afford the car loan that you could have afforded quite easily while you were working, your mortgage or your rent. And managing these issues at an early stage can prevent loss of jobs, housing and so on. And much of our work on welfare benefits centres around supporting clients wishing to dispute decisions or appeal work, and supporting gathering evidence and writing submissions. With the loss of this work nationally, it's no surprise that the latest figures from Her Majesty's Courts and Tribunal Service shows a dramatic reduction in the number of social security and child support appeals that have been lodged this year. Yet in those areas where there hasn't been loss of support or no major change, like immigration cases and mental health appeals, the figures haven't changed very much at all. And the most striking area where the figures have dropped is that of disputed decisions connected with work capability assessments for employment support allowance, or, as you know it, poor assessments by ATOS. This is the biggest single issue that affects our clients in Shropshire and across the National Service too, where evidence shows how people at their most vulnerable are being failed by a system that just doesn't work. Appeals have dropped off significantly from nearly 120,000 in the first quarter of this year, just down to 33,000 in the third quarter. And it's not a system that's getting any better because of it. Of over 45% of those appeals are upheld, or the decision's been shown to be wrong. And that figures have been increasing year on year. And there are 2 access to justice issues here. Aside from not having the specialist support and advice that people need, there's now the mandatory internal review of a case before it can be lodged at appeal, with no time limit for the case being reviewed and no benefit paid while it's being reviewed. And there's a third impact. As I said, people now have to pay for that medical evidence. Under legal aid, if you were on low income and we helped you with your appeal, we could get the medical evidence and legal aid would pay for that, but so no longer. So if you're trying to appeal that decision, you have to find the £50 for that letter to support you in your appeal. Similarly, the introduction to new fees has brought down a dramatic reduction in the number of employment tribunals that were lodged, with only nearly 10,000 appeals being received in this third quarter compared to the 45,000 in the previous. And that doesn't mean that people have stopped having problems at work, and certainly our clients continue to struggle with unfair terms and conditions, discrimination, unfair dismissal, redundancy. And our specialist caseworker, funded by the lottery at the moment, supports clients with claims that are too small for no win, no fee. But small claims like £1,000 for unpaid wages is a lot for somebody on low pay. And we know that the DWP are looking into plans to introduce similar payment schemes for social security appeals, a further barrier for people. No legal aid, no specialist help, and no appeal unless you can pay. And there's also a tendency to move away from national government schemes with built-in appeal procedures towards more localised schemes like the council tax support, discretionary housing payment, and local welfare assistance programmes that have replaced the Social Fund in April 2013. And this is at a time when the government plans to make radical changes to judicial review. Judicial review is an important legal tool which allows ordinary people to hold public authorities to account for the decisions they make, fundamental to a healthy democracy. For example, judicial review has been used to challenge and overturn homelessness decisions. So it's really no exaggeration to say that judicial review can be the difference of a roof over a family's head or homelessness. As a service, Citizens Advice fed our concerns back to the government, and the government did offer concessions on who can bring a judicial review, because it would have made it impossible for charities to pursue on behalf of the people they represent. But they still plan to proceed with the majority of their reforms. And the main aim of the reforms is to place more financial risk on claimants and those who support them. No guarantee of payment and no protection from costs. So if the financial risks are greater, you can imagine that there's going to be fewer judicial reviews lodged. So yes, access to justice is getting harder, with possible more barriers to come. So the importance of free, independent and impartial advice with early intervention is as important now as it's ever been. The Citizens Advice Service celebrates its 75th anniversary this year, with the first CAB opening on the first day of World War II. And in Shropshire, the Oswestry office opened its doors on the 6th of December 1939. So for 75 years, we've been helping people overcome those barriers to access to justice, and will continue to do so, giving the advice that people need for the problems they face, and campaigning on their behalf to change the policies and practices that impact on their lives. Campaigning is an essential part of the work that Citizens Advice do, and the evidence and the experience of our clients tells us and gives us a unique insight into the problems faced by the people in Shropshire. And that's why we don't only help individuals, but also try to tackle the cause of problems. We press for change to make sure that the problems don't keep happening again and again to different people. So the People's Assembly can help with campaigns to change things for the better. You could keep up to date with our local campaigns and see what we do on our website, both nationally and locally. You could help with our evidence gathering by letting people know that they can tell us their stories. And I know we've got the digital agenda, but that on our website you can put your story through on there, or write to us and tell us, or volunteer to be a campaigner. Examples of our current campaigns are going to be the Fit for Work campaign for employment support allowance and work capability assessments, to make sure that the government, when they renew their contracts, make sure it's a fairer system that works, and that they listen to the medical evidence of the people who know you best. We're also going to be looking at the impact of the job centre closure in Ludlow and the use of food banks and the experience of our clients there. Thank you very much.